we'll get started with demos. Is there a team that wants to lead off?
Yeah, probably we should go.
Yeah, I feel like ours is pretty straightforward. So let's do it. All right, I will share what I got. Okay, let's do this. So this week, Alina and I were tasked with basically allowing or enabling a user to be able to join an existing list. So as we know, the token that's assigned to you whenever you create a new list is a 3-word string. And so basically, if you were able to give that to somebody, they could have the same access and be able to add items, etc., to your list. So basically, we just added the bottom portion of this kind of home component that we've built out. So for example, if you know that 3-word string, so for example, this one I know should work, tin verb job. You can join the existing list. And here you go. These are all the items that belong to that list. And then if you wanted to go in, again, just to like double check that this makes or that this works, what's something that we could buy? I don't know. How about noodles kind of soon? You can still add them and then see them here in your list. Now, the other side of that, well, I guess one edge case that we considered was if there is an incorrect token, or if one does not exist in our database, then there's another option. So we go back to the home screen. So let's say I just type in that, it should not work. Cool, we get a little error message here that says it does not exist, and we can try again or create a new list. Well, you know, if you wanted to change the capitalization or whatever, that's fine. But yeah, so that was just a little bit of error handling. And then of course, creating a new list still works if that were to be what you wanted to do. So that's pretty much the functionality of it in our app. And so now I will hand it off to Alina to talk about the code here.
To implement this functionality, so we use the simple input with button and label. Button has we added a function to button which executes everything DJ just showed you. So first, we are looking in Firebase for existing tokens. So we created a query, like we say, find this token is in collection called token. So in this case, we use user token, so user's input, and then we send this request to Firebase, and as a result, so we receive a query snapshot, a variable called query snapshot. So it is an object. So if a token was found, if it exists in Firebase, so this object has a property docs, and it is in array. So if it was found, this query snapshot that docs that length, so it exists. So we can say that a token was found, and we set it in local storage, and we navigate to list view. If it wasn't found, that means like so length doesn't exist, it wasn't found, so we send a notification. In our case, we use Toast. It's like React. I don't know how it's called. It's like so it's okay. It's a notification which says that token does not exist, and we set our user's token to empty string, and we also console.log this user token. So for convenience, if you want to check what kind of token did you try. That's it. That's it. And also we did a small update to add item and list view. It is something we discussed last week. So when you load this page, we check for existing token inside a local storage. If it wasn't found, so the user navigates pushed to a home page. If it was found, you can proceed. And the same like for list view. like before it was possible to visit these pages without a saved local token. So we fixed this. I think that's it.
Cool. Any questions, comments?
I like how your team is getting more into Firebase and like how to query things from Firebase and seeing what kind of data we're getting and then how to use it for these edge cases. That was really cool to see. So thanks for including that.
Thank you.
I feel like I should already know this, but how does our list sort?
I don't think that
We're not doing anything to sort it, but I'm
No.
wondering what the kind of the default is, since it just put your new item in the middle.
Yeah, I think it probably has to do, if I had to
I think
guess,
it's random.
it could be random, or it might have something to do like Firebase is sending back these in a certain order based on their unique identifier. But we'll definitely like
Get to it. Yeah. That popped up in my head and I was like, I wonder what we're doing.
for sure. Yeah. That's a really good note.
Yeah, great job. You guys had a really, it was very easy to follow your code. And I think like all the little tiny updates you made it even clearer. So
Thank
awesome.
you. Thanks.
Okay. Lindsay and Shelly, do you guys want to go?
Okay, muted, Shelly.
Okay, now I'm working. So I don't have a local token yet so that we could start on this page. And we're going to create a new list to illustrate the adding an item and then adding one that's a duplicate. So our favorite tortured food stuff is tofu. So that's added successfully. It's in there. And now I'm going to try and add it again. Tofu, add item, error, it already exists. That's easy. I did it exactly the same way. We also added all the catches to if we spell it differently, if we put spaces in there, if we do crazy things to torture it. Oops, not a J, that'll throw it. Still can't type. Oh, F you. Okay, and that is all still recognized as tofu. So you can't add the funky one. We also, the acceptance criteria said to take the first one. So if you weirdly put this into your shopping list the very first time as tofu, that's what's going to be on your list, but we have a way to deal with that. So in our code, let's see. So we are using the list because we're going to go to the database, right? So, and for duplicate message, we're going to go to the database and pull that up because we have to pull the whole list so that we can check it. There's probably a more efficient way to do that, but it works. So then what we had to do was normalize both sets so that we could compare the word if somebody typed in something insane, either the first time or the last time. So we bring in the item name from our list. So that's the one that's been entered in the database. We check that both the list item from the database and the one that is entered gets set to lowercase. So that's the first check. Then we go through them and replace all characters, all spaces, split them out and make them the clean, normalized, lowercase, no spaces, perfect words to be compared to each other. And if a duplicate is found, if they're exactly the same, then that's when the error message comes up. Now, Lindsay.
Yeah, so I'll talk about how the form submission works. So the duplicate found variable that's set in the duplicate check function is really controlling the handle submit. It's acting as a gatekeeper to say, like, if duplicate found is true, we're going to set this error message that the item, the specific item already exists in your list that the user is trying to add. And then we're going to return out of the submit. We're not going to allow it to continue on to be added to the database. And then if duplicate found is false, then we're just going to clear that duplicate message and allow that item to go on to attempt to be added to the database through our try and catch to Firebase. And then further on in our return is where we render this error message. And we kind of discussed about how to refactor this into using hot toast. So that's something I put in the issues for us to take a look at. But I have it separated as another component where it's just creating this red text that pops up and then is cleared when the user attempts to add a new item with a new handle submit click. Are there any questions or comments about our code?
I love how you don't trust the users. Usually, I trust users too much, and then the QA comes back and goes, well, the user did all this. I'm like, geez, nobody would ever do that. So that's impressive. And the even cooler part is now you can put that in Shelly and Lindsay's string utilities. So when you work on next projects, you already have that part figured out. You don't have to keep redoing it.
Yeah.
I'm loving it. It's impressive.
Yeah, this is just thinking about all the edge cases you have to think about and doing regex. I'm not a fan of that stuff, right? Just off the bat, but I still wonder if there's a middle ground, because we're doing the job of checking to make sure that it's not in the database, but I almost think that we shouldn't trust the users as much as we are in a way. For example, no exclamation points or question marks or weird characters. A hyphen is fine because maybe, you want to buy a t-shirt or something like that. But I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of leeway there. I don't know if I'm looking too much into that, but when we get the error message that says coffee, 6 exclamation points exist in our database, that's kind of true, but not really, unless they put those 6 exclamation points, and then that's really awkward. You know what I mean?
Maybe that's what we need to return is the one that's in the database, as opposed to the one they entered.
Even that would be. Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, the error message.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That would be more, I think, user friendly. Well, yeah. I mean, they want to see how do we tell them that what they're inputting is already in the database directly? Will they get that? I don't know. Well, we should talk about it though.
Well, when they put something weird in and it comes back, hopefully the first one they put in was weird intentionally, so they'll recognize it.
Right. But I also think that we can decide in the same way that a user has to follow a certain set of rules to create a password, right? You have to have this character, whatever, we could say sorry, you can't include these characters, whatever we choose that to be, maybe.
And the one thing I would add is because as you notice, it's fuzzy, and let's say you don't have a designer or project manager to tell you, whatever you decide, write it down in the code and in PR. So when you hand this off to QA and users, they'll see exactly what the rules you went with. So then they don't kind of have to guess, well, is this broken or is this by design? Nothing's perfect. Gonna get maybe 99% there, but just when you decide on something, just make sure people can see it explicitly what it is. Because it's such a fuzzy little thing, especially if some languages maybe use those additional characters, but English one maybe doesn't need to. It's a whole world out there. At which point, you might as well start looking into other libraries, which is kind of out of scope of this, right? Somebody else has probably solved some of that.
That's a really good point, Rudy. I had a tiny question. I thought you guys worked really hard on this week. It was so interesting to see the different iterations. And I was curious how you worked through, I think of it originally, a lot of the logic was in the error component and then you moved it out. So how did you guys decide to organize your code this way? How did you come to that?
Yeah, we kind of had some issues with our code not rendering on the first submission, or the error message not rendering on the first submission. So we wanted to kind of centralize where we were getting that list, where we were getting that error message, and then where we were getting that gatekeeper that would block the submission, that would control the error message all in one. So that was really React, us not having the behavior that we expected with React and updating on that submission was really the thing that pushed us to more centralize the functionality.
Yeah, well, nice jobs, both teams. That was really great. And I think Lindsay you mentioned this, but you added a new ticket. Do you want to just quickly mention that before?
Yeah, I did add a new issue. I added a new pull request. We had some duplicate code when I was updating the normalization. So there's a pull request already to remove that. And then I also added an issue, a new ticket, where I kind of put in some of the stuff we had talked about, like Elena and DJ contributed to our issue, some of the suggestions we made. I put in what were my thoughts of it were going to, and anything I thought I could help, but again, I got a blocker on that. So we'll take some time to investigate and figure out. I included the hot toast details and talking about how we were going to make the normalization methods a utility function that we could call in. So to clean up our main component a little bit.
Cool, thanks. So if no one else has any other comments, I think it's Eddie's handing it off to Eddie for some pair programming. Is that right?
Yeah, sounds good. No one else has any other thoughts they want to discuss? Cool. I will. Let's see here. It wants to take over my screen. Okay, and we'll share. To do this, and then oh nope. All right, there we go. Can you see it's a pair programming, the Collab Lab? Cool. All right. So yeah, I mean, right, in some ways it's like this would have been really helpful like several weeks ago before you started pair programming. But right, that's kind of, and I think Lauren mentioned this like, earlier, like the goal is to just get you in there, right? Like to get you doing it and kind of feeling like, okay, how do we do this? How do we want to try to do this? Encountering your own things that work well and things that don't work well. Because I think one of the key things about pair programming is some people can get very fixated on like a specific structure. And like, this is right pair programming and this is wrong pair programming. But in all reality, pair programming is about two people coming together to write better code. Everything else is like guidelines and structure to help because people can have different personalities and people can have different quirks and things like that. And so, the structures and the frameworks and stuff, they help to kind of sand down corners of the fact that two people are interacting, but they're not like rules. They're not things you have to follow. So, when it comes to pair programming, before we get into talking about the details, like just remember that like the best pair programming is the pair programming that works well for the two people who are involved, right? And when you have big companies and big teams, like you come up with like standards and approaches that help blend that stuff together so people kind of know what they're getting into and best practices and stuff like that. So yeah, pair programming, right? What is it? Well, essentially it's two developers in front of a computer or virtually across the interwebs sharing a screen. And the key is that they have two different roles. One is called the driver and one is called the navigator, right? And in some ways it really helps. It's kind of like, when you think about airplanes and you think about air traffic control, the pilot in the plane doesn't care about what's happening on the other side of the United States, right? Like, or the world. All they care about is the airspace around them, right? They are flying a plane, and the key is to get the plane moving forward, to keep the plane in the air, and not to hit other planes. Right? Like that's the end result. And like air traffic control, they are sitting far, far away, right? They are zoomed out, like literally little pieces of airplanes are like little icons moving across the screen, and they're looking at the bigger picture and they're like, okay, there's one plane here and there's another plane here. And like, how do we make sure that these planes are, traveling in safe ways and in efficient ways? And how do we make sure that this whole thing kind of works together? And so that's really what the driver and the navigator does, right? The driver is flying this plane. They are, how do we get us to the destination? And the navigator is kind of zooming out and saying like, okay, what things are you not thinking about because you're looking straight ahead, right? Like you are trying to bring this thing to life. And so what are those edge cases, right, that we might run into, that you're thinking about how the strings are being matched up and things like that, and you need someone else to have this wider view. So often, right, that's what, when you don't pair program, that's what a code review ends up becoming. Like you program something and then someone comes in and goes, oh, did you think about this? Did you think about that? And the beauty is, like, in pair programming, you can adjust for that as you're programming, right? You're not having to spend all the time programming something, put it into a PR, get feedback, and go back for version 2. You're getting that really real-time feedback. So we work remotely. The world is shifting remotely. So how does this work remotely? It can be pretty simple, right? And this is probably fairly similar to what you all have been doing. You can literally have, hop on a screen sharing call, have one person share their screen. That's typically going to be the driver because they're coding. So the person who is actively coding, obviously their screen needs to be shared. The navigator, they're thinking about these zoomed out things. So they can be looking at what the driver is doing. They can be thinking about edge cases. They can be asking questions like, oh, that's interesting. Like you did it that way. Can you explain more about what you were trying to do there? The driver can then, when they want to switch roles, push code to the remote repo. The navigator pulls it down and then they swap steps. And that's actually a key discussion point here is, you never want to spend too much time with one person always doing the same role. I think it can be very common, especially in situations where there are people of different levels of seniority and stuff in companies, to lean towards like, oh, you're the senior developer, I'm the mid or junior developer. Like I'm always going to be here, like asking questions and looking how you code, or vice versa. Like it may be, oh, I'm the junior developer, so I always program, and the senior is like poking holes in all my stuff, right? And that can lead to very kind of, dangerous like elements between things, right? It makes it where pairing isn't as fun or enjoyable, right? It can lead to more confrontation. And so because of that, one of the really good principles is like constantly shifting. And the timing of that depends on whatever works for the team, right? Sometimes people say, hey, every 10 minutes swap, or, every ticket swap, or, every 30 minutes or every session, right? Maybe one session you do it one way and the next session you do it another way. So exactly how often you swap isn't as important as just making sure that when you are pairing with the same person, you are, adjusting to make sure that each person sits in each seat, because everyone has different perspectives. And so that's going to really help out. So there's, some mindset and attitude. That's really the thing that makes pair programming work or not work. Any company or any time that you do pair programming, there's always going to be times where you feel like, wow, that didn't work because, one of the two people didn't have the right mindset or attitude, and it kind of ruins it for everyone. So yeah, I think, having a beginner's mind, right? Embracing doubt and possibility. So not trying to limit the discussions, not trying to limit things, but talk about how you can do things and talk about, well, what do we think about this? A lot of it should be more asking questions than making judgments or things like that. It's not about teaching, it is about working together. It's really more about collaboration, and you don't really want to, put power dynamics into it. Like, obviously, sometimes some people will have more experience than others, but when it comes to programming, like, sometimes experience leads to oversights in a way as well. And so, like, it's important to know that even though people have different experience levels, like, people with fresh perspectives can oftentimes teach a lot more to people who are more senior. So that doesn't really play a heavy role in pair programming. So yeah, and then specific advice for drivers, right? Seek agreement before proceeding. So, like, kind of talk through what you're trying to accomplish and how you think you're going to accomplish that. If you think that you should do it this way and the navigator thinks you should do it that way, and you start, like, there's going to be constant friction the whole time. So deciding and agreeing on a plan ahead of time is great. And then, yeah, navigators, kind of what I just mentioned a little bit ago, like, ask, don't tell. So you want to make sure that you're asking questions, you're generating discussion, you're not making judgment or trying to correct the other person, because that's going to shut down the conversation. And it's really not about this person or that person being better at programming, but it's about the fact that two minds can generate something better than one. So, kind of with all that discussion, we'll share the slides. There's some nice links about, pair programming and everything that we've probably shared some of it before, but really the next key thing is just like, hey, how has pair programming been working for you all? How is this kind of that we've discussed aligned with what you've experienced? And, like, have you all had any learnings that you've already kind of hit on, like, as you've been doing this and realized, like, oh, we actually want to, like, do it differently next time, or things like that?
I'd say we've been doing a really, really good job of it. Though we haven't been doing the swapping, I don't think. I think we, like, just pick whoever's going to be the driver for that issue. So that's a cool thing to try. But I think we just naturally really did this, where one person drove. I think I even called it driving, and one person was the eagle eye. Yeah, it's been really good and aligned to that.
Yeah, I've loved it. Like, I feel like, when you're working on projects on your own, you can just sit looking at a screen for hours and you're just like, what do I do? But just having that other person to talk things through and, like, problem solve is really fun. It just makes the work exciting. And Elaine and I actually tried the VS Code live share, and it works beautifully. Like, it was so cool for both of us to be able to type in real time. I mean, yeah, I could see a world where you don't actually have to screen share. Like, you could be talking to each other, but, like, and still have, like, the driver or navigator roles, but be able to say, let me just, like, change this line and, like, just go from there. It was very cool. So, yeah, VS Code is pretty awesome.
Do you guys find that you, oh, sorry, Rudy. Oh, I just want to ask, do you find that you tend to go towards one role over the other, or is everybody, like, equally comfortable with both?
I never been driver yet, so next week probably will try.
You're driving this week,
But
for sure.
Yeah, but probably for me it's, like, more comfortable. Like,
Yeah, I really like just like getting code written. Like, I really have to write it to see it and to imagine it. So sometimes I guess I default to the driver, but I definitely like the ebb and flow and backing out. I like live share too, like to be able to do it at the same time and, like, show each other what our thoughts are. But yeah, I'm really visual, so I really like writing, which sometimes I guess puts me in more of a, I guess, driver view. But yeah.
And I'm like surprised that like we followed the rules, like you just showed us, like we have driver, navigator, discussion, agreement, like everything like was described. Nice.
Yeah, it's really nice compared to my bootcamp, like where, some people will just like tell you to write something in like a very certain way. And I feel like with pair programming here, it's been very much like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Like it's more like trying to inspire each other on how we can write code, suggesting things, and I am very inspired. So I love that.
And it's so much faster than I would have thought. That's the part that's amazing, because you have those immediate checks and somebody else can do the Googling, or you both can do it at the same time. It goes so much faster than what I think two people could do separately, which is counterintuitive, but awesome.
Rudy, I interrupted you before. Did you have something else you wanted to add?
Oh yeah. I had no idea that VS Code had a live share, so that's awesome. I had this like paranoid for a second that somebody will like figure out the links and start going writing my code, but I gotta try that one. And I just want to mention to the group, since you're already doing so well at pair programming, you might find yourself in a situation where you actually need to teach somebody else how to do it. Like, because industry is like very varied, right? I haven't had much experience with it. And I think when we had our office hours, it was like one of the most collaborative cases when I had, because you were telling me, oh, well, you can go check out this component and this. And it was like, it was great for all of us. So just like here, have doubts, like, no, you're doing the right way. Just, spread a message to the world. Collaboration is good.
Yeah, I think you all will find, as you're working at different companies, like a lot of people don't either have never pair programmed, or they've had really bad experiences pair programming and don't understand like what true pair programming is. And so I think you'll find, taking your experiences, like you will be able to help people understand how to do it really helpful and really effectively. And you may have to like prod, if it's not like a company standard, you may have to prod people sometimes at a new company, like, hey, like, let's just pair up. Most of the companies I've been to, like, oftentimes, unless it's like a startup that is really like devoted to pair programming, it's not an institutional thing that happens a lot. But most companies are not going to have a problem with it if that's something that two people on a team want to do. And so I think you may find that you need to kind of push it a little bit, like, hey, like, you want to pair up sometime and work on our tickets and stuff. And you may need to help coach and guide and talk through how some of that would go. But ultimately, like, you and the people you pair with will be doing things, higher quality, more effectively, that can actually begin to have an influence on the whole team structure as a whole and stuff, if people notice and stuff. So definitely good. But you will notice like a lot of people either don't have the experience or have had just some poor experiences, and your good experience here is really going to be able to carry that through. So and yeah, the VS Code is really awesome. And if you ever end up using IntelliJ's products as well, for any companies or different things like that, they also have a very similar one that they built. So whether VS Code or IntelliJ, you can sync up with someone else using the same IDE, and but very nice, because the navigator can hop around to different areas of the code while they're talking and like be thinking things through and like, wait, what did we do over here? And like you can just go look at it while the driver is driving. So definitely a nice step up from a screen share, which like is doable, but then when it gets a little pixelated and you're like, what does that word say? Like the VS Code is definitely that nice upgrade.
Yeah, when you're like, that comma there, no, over there, no, a little bit up to line 15, nope, 16.
Comma or period?
Okay, awesome. Well, I think Rudy, your issues are next, unless anyone else has something to add.
Okay, I can do issues. Now I have an issue. What's the difference between comma and period? But I'll Google it. Okay, let's get a screen share going. Desktop. Okay. Let me know when you see my Safari.
Can see it.
Sweet.
Can I
Okay.
ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Do we need to deal with the little pull request for the tweak that we did before we make new branches and everything? Because now we have, I just don't know if we messed anything up by adding that little edit to our branch after merging.
That seems like something you could just push
Yeah.
up. Like,
Yeah.
you're just editing your own code. Like, we don't, I mean, we did that, like Alina and I, we changed stuff and just pushed it to the main branch. Like, are we not supposed to do that? I don't know.
Some of that
Hey, Lindsay,
naturally
push it to
happens
me.
when you're like a lot of times when you're merging conflicts or you're fixing merge conflicts, you'll have to do a little bit of tweaking and you're pushing it to main, right? So like I think if it's little things like that, it's okay. But then generally with like refactoring, it goes through another PR. So
Yeah.
but
Okay,
yeah,
I'm
see,
merging
this
it
was
then.
a little, yeah, it was a tiny one, right? Just there was like
Yeah.
the duplicate lines.
Yeah, it's
Got
it's using the best judgment, because once you get in the habit of doing it, then at some point something will break and you go, this should have been a PR. But I'd say it's fun because you told us in this meeting, right? So it can be considered communicated to the rest of the team, right? It won't be like surprise, like Shelly woke up at 4 a.m. and made changes. You're like, you told this is gonna happen, so not pushing is totally good. That's how I see it. Okay. I think issues this week are going to be pretty exciting because they let you be creative to some degree, and the way I've seen y'all think this is going to be awesome for the team. One of the tasks is lighter than the others, but it will also, I think, give you some opportunity and bandwidth to maybe improve some things or try some things differently and all that. In this one here, and let me open the wireframe first because I think that's going to make it much more obvious. Like, you just want to show what was checked, right? You want to see, well, what has user actually finished here? And I think requirements in that sense are pretty, oh geez, I think I was the wrong one. I think requirements in that case are pretty straightforward. You just need to make sure that, in the last 24 hours, needs to be shown as checked, and they need to be able to see that. Now, the cool part here, though, is how do you work with the test data? So let's say team 1 finishes this branch. Now, team 2 then has to create items and mark some of them as checked. But it'd be kind of cool, like if you have time or bandwidth, figure out, can you maybe create a function that will already populate with test data? Like maybe have a button in the app or in a console that will create few checked, few unchecked. So when you give this to the other team, they can just, with one button, create this test list with old cases, like checked and checked. They can just kind of see what's going on. But like, this is the part to be creative. Like, how can you make testing of this easier for the other team too? Because as data gets more complex, the more the other team will need to do to get to the point to test the UI. And again, in this case, it's just checked or unchecked based on how much time passed. Let me know if that makes sense, and then I can move to the next one. Okay. And this is the one that I think is a little bit lighter, but again, it gives you more time to either work on this or improve the other things in the app. So when the app starts, what is user supposed to do? Like, it's just this big empty screen and they have to look on the bottom. Oh, this is where I add the thing, right? So you're almost like missing the arrow that points, hey, go down here, do something, or click here to add something. Like, what is the better onboarding experience? And you notice some apps have like a really warm, welcoming way of doing it. It's like, hey, welcome, we can help you add stuff. Go click here, or here's a button for you, or here's a first form. Of course, try to be mindful of time, but this kind of lets you give the quote unquote first good impression to the user. Like, they open the app, well, what do they do? Do you tell them? Do you show them? Do you add them a button? I'd say have fun, but be more conservative with time as much as possible. You don't want this to become like a endless scope creep. Or you can just quickly check this off and use this time to maybe see about improving something else in the app if you have some tasks that were, I think somebody talked about refactoring the code and all that. So does this one also make sense? Okay. And then, so who feels like doing which one? And if you need time to talk with yourselves, that's cool too, or we can pick now. That all works for me.
Oh, and pairs this week are DJ, Lindsay, and Elena and Shelly.
Elena, do you have strong feelings either way?
It feels like number 8 more tricky, so more interesting. Maybe.
So you want to do more tricky?
don't
Okay.
mind.
Remember, you get
If
to
you don't
drive
mind.
this time.
Okay.
I think with number 7, we
Just
can do
kidding.
some cool CSS animations, maybe get into that a little bit too. So yeah, I think this will work well.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I love when you figure out that that a notification pop up on the top. It's just like so please, like, boop, boop, boop. So yeah, I love the little UI thing. So like these both look exciting to me.
I may ask about 8. So when we check the box, we write to database, right? Like we keep the data. The data was when item was purchased, right?
Yeah, and well, it's interesting because let me think. Usually set the checkbox, switch check is 24 hours after purchase is made. So I'm assuming in the database you're recording when user checked, and then you kind of have to see whatever time passed to decide it should be unchecked. And it's a fun challenge because it lets you figure out the data, and feel free to ping us in Slack as you're thinking this through and all that. It's intentionally vague for that, just to see how you think about this.
This is kind of unrelated, but the app learning how we buy different items, is that an algorithm that we will come up with, or is that like?
Oh, good question. Not Lindsay. My brain's not working.
Lauren?
Yes, Lauren, the other L person. Lauren, do you know if how much? I know there's some stuff like that coming up, but I don't remember exactly.
I think there is an algorithm that's provided, or sometimes teams choose, like they want to make it more exact, like do standard deviations and stuff. So it could be if like whoever gets that ticket wants to, you could write your own. But I'm pretty sure there's a basic one that's already there.
Yeah, and so for context, if you're curious, item number 10 is estimating the next purchase date. And so that has a function you can pull in to calculate the estimate. So you can take a look there. You can take a look at that script. That may help you, right? Knowing what's coming down the road. Like, okay, what does that script need if we're thinking about using that, so that the work you do today can be like preparing and setting that up.
This app looked deceivingly the simple one I saw first time, but then when I was looking at these issues, I'm like, oh, so there's like actually this app needs to know the history and then be able to guess the future. Like, this is a good problem. And there's so many ways to approach it.
Yeah, it seems really simple, but it ramps up in complexity pretty quickly.
Okay, I think that's it for issues then, right? And then what else do we got?
This is our 5th meeting already. Are we at the halfway point? 0, 1.
4, I think.
Okay, we're in the 4th. Okay, next week is our halfway point. Isn't that crazy?
Time flies.
Should we create the branches, or go ahead and do that? Okay.
Do you want to do it, Elena, or you want me to? Or have you already done it? You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I want to try this way, like I did show this through GitHub. I just want trying to find my. How we want to call it?
Let's see, you're on the more
if I do this-
complex one.
How do we make that short? It's a frequency thing. So
Oh, checkbox. Something like-
item frequency.
Is it a frequency? Where is
Well,
in a checkbox?
It's a checkbox, right? But
If I call it item checkbox, is it clear?
that works.
Okay, so what do I do now? Oh, okay. Click here, right? Okay, try to pull.